Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome back to another session on my not rumination, but Declassified Caribbean News channel. Now, today we're going to be looking at another interesting topic. Has Barbados benefited from the Mia Mottley's global leadership? Now, Mia Mottley is widely regarded, even by many political opponents, as a highly skilled communicator and one of the Caribbean's most prominent political figures. She's known for being articulate, quick-witted rather, and capable of delivering memorable speeches. She also often uses humor, storytelling, and sharp exchanges in Parliament and public appearances, which many supporters and critics alike find entertaining. So for this program, I am going to be looking at, has Barbados benefited from Mia Mottley's global leadership? Whatever your political views, it's difficult to deny that Mia Mottley is one of the Caribbean's most formidable political communicators. She commands attention on the world stage, speaks with confidence, and has given Barbados an international profile that few Caribbean leaders have achieved. The question, however, is whether that global stature has translated into measurable improvements in the lives of ordinary Barbadians. Now, welcome to another session on my Declassified channel. Today's question is both timely and important. Has Barbados benefited from Mia Mottley's global leadership? We're asking this very poignant question. Few Caribbean leaders have achieved the level of international recognition that Prime Minister Mia Mottley has. She has become one of the world's most prominent voices on climate change, debt reform, global inequality, and the challenges facing small island developing states. Whether addressing the United Nations, the Commonwealth, COP, climate summits, or the World Bank, Mia Mottley has positioned Barbados at the center of global conversations. Supporters argue that she has given Barbados an international influence that far exceeds its size. Through the Bridgetown Initiative, she has called for reform of the international financial system, arguing that poor and climate vulnerable nations should have access to affordable financing to build resilience and recover from disasters. She has also become one of the Caribbean's leading advocates for reparatory justice, insisting that the legacy of slavery and colonialism continues to shape economic inequalities today. Many would say that no Barbadian prime minister has done more to elevate Barbados' global profile. But this raises another question. Has this global prestige translated into a better life for ordinary Barbadians? That is where we want to look at. We want to look at the opinions today, and this is where opinions begin to diverge. While Barbados has earned international praise, many Barbadians continue to express concerns about the rising cost of living, increasing food prices, housing affordability, pressures on the healthcare system, challenges within education, and the broader economic outlook. Some argue that these domestic issues deserve the same level of attention as Barbados' international leadership. Political commentator Marcia Weeks, for example, has argued that some children are now attending school hungry, something she says would once have been almost unthinkable in Barbados. She has mentioned, or she has questioned rather, whether the country's international ambitions are being matched by sufficient attention to the everyday struggles of the Barbadian families. These are her views, but they reflect concerns that are part of the country's public debate. There is also an important discussion surrounding climate change itself. Prime Minister Mottley has become one of the world's foremost advocates for climate finance. Her supporters argue that this is essential. Barbados is a small island state vulnerable to stronger hurricanes, coastal erosion, rising sea levels, and other climate-related risks. They contend that countries like Barbados should not have to borrow at high interest rates to recover from disasters or invest in resilience when they have contributed relatively little to global greenhouse gas emissions. Critics, however, ask different questions. They ask whether ordinary citizens are seeing meaningful improvements in their daily lives. They question who benefits most from the rapidly expanded climate finance industry. Do the greatest benefits flow to vulnerable communities, or are international financial institutions, consultants, investment funds, and global organizations capturing much of the economic value? Another major issue is reparations. Suggestions, or supporters rather, I should say, view reparatory justice as a moral and historical imperative, arguing that former colonial powers should acknowledge and help address the enduring economic consequences of slavery and colonialism. Others ask practical questions. If reparations are eventually secured, how would they be distributed? How would governments ensure transparency? Would the average citizen experience tangible improvements, or would the benefits be less direct? These debates lead to a broader question. Are climate finance and reparations simply separate policy initiatives, or are they increasingly connected through a wider international agenda aimed at reshaping global economic relationships? If so, what does that mean for countries like Barbados? Who ultimately benefits and who bears the costs? Today's discussion is not about questioning Barbados' right to pursue international leadership, nor is it about dismissing the importance of climate change or reparatory justice. Rather, it asks a straightforward question that every democracy should be willing to debate. Has Mia Mottley's growing international stature produced measurable benefits for the average Barbadian? Or has Barbados become a country that is admired abroad while many citizens continue to struggle with challenges at home? Those are the questions we will examine today. Let us know where you stand in these comments, and please keep this discussion respectful, evidence-based, and focused on the issues. Now, we're going to look at the Bridgetown initiative that was formed crafted in Barbados. So we have the Bridgetown initiative is a proposal launched by Prime Minister Mia Mottley in 2022 to reform the global financial system so that developing countries, especially small island states, can better cope with climate change and other crises. Its main ideas include cheaper financing for developing countries. Many small countries pay much higher interest rates than wealthy countries when they borrow. She says that developing nations pay 3 times the interest rates that developed countries pay. The initiative argues that institutions like the World Bank and IMF should provide more affordable financing, more money for climate adaptation, help countries build sea defenses, strengthen infrastructure, improve water systems, and prepare for hurricanes and floods before disasters occur. Faster disaster financing. After hurricanes or other catastrophes, countries often wait months for funding. The initiative proposes mechanisms to provide immediate financial support, such as debt reform. Countries heavily burdened by debt should have easier access to debt restructuring or temporary payment pauses following major disasters. Greater lending by multilateral development banks. The World Bank and similar institutions would increase their lending capacity to help developing nations invest in long-term development and climate resilience. Has it been successful? Well, supporters argue that it has changed the global conversation on climate finance. It has gained backing from countries such as France and from international organizations. Some reforms at the World Bank and IMF have been influenced by its proposals, although implementation has been gradual. Critics argue also that progress has been slower than originally hoped. Many proposals have yet to be fully implemented, ordinary Barbadians may not yet have seen clear direct benefits in their daily lives. So one of the most interesting questions isn't whether the Bridgetown Initiative has been influential internationally. It clearly has. Rather, it's the question we need to ask: has Barbados' global leadership on climate finance translated into measurable improvements in the lives of ordinary Barbadians? Or have the benefits been more diplomatic than economic? This is what we want to ask in our live session today. Now, welcome to the live, everyone. Let me see if you have any comments. Welcome. We want to welcome Andrea. Welcome to the live. Every country is experiencing high prices in everything, not only Barbados. And after COVID-19, things have skyrocketed. And you are right about that all countries, and we need to have a conversation in another live on the cost of living in the Caribbean. But let's look at the facts. We are hearing here from the BBC. They're saying Barbados PM fights for shake-up of global climate finance. So world leaders meeting in Paris on Thursday could give poor countries access to hundreds of billions of dollars to tackle climate change. Mia Mottley, Barbados' first female prime minister, is leading the global fight for this money and tells BBC News that her tiny country urgently needs help. Poorer nations want more money because they did little to cause climate change but face its worst effects. They also struggle to afford expensive projects like renewable energy. Climate finance, including funding for flood defenses or solar plants, has long been one of the biggest sticking points in climate negotiations. So obviously, Ms. Mia Mottley is about climate change. Now, does she want the system to be reformed in terms of having the poor, right, get access to monies that they have been stolen? Or does she want to direct all of the help, the reparations that we are supposedly due, to be given to climate change? That is what we have to ask ourselves the question. We can't just listen to what she's saying. We have to look at the trends and look deeper at her words, right? We have to parse every sentence. Now, we're saying Barbados is responsible for just 0.01% of global greenhouse gas emissions, yet it stands on the global front line. Rising seas, stronger storms, droughts and floods threaten lives, livelihoods, and ecosystems, jeopardizing decades of social and economic progress. Across the Caribbean, unchecked climate impacts could cost as much as $22 billion per year by 2050. So is this now about making money, this climate change agenda? Are they going to be collecting money so that they can transfer the wealth from the richest, from the poorest rather, to the richest of us? These are some questions that we need to pose to them. Now, the crisis is compounded by a debt trap. Climate vulnerable nations are forced to borrow heavily simply to recover from disasters, pushing their economies deeper into unsustainable debt. Now, one of the things that we have to look at is the fact that many times when they talk about us borrowing, are we getting the money to build, or are they using the money, directing the funds for other means? We have seen where monies were sent to Haiti. Monies have been sent to Jamaica and other countries. And what has happened is that these funds have not been used for the purposes for which they were actually sent. So we cannot be actually fooled and deceived by a climate agenda, because what it is that we're doing, we're borrowing money. At the same time, we are transferring the wealth from the poorest to the richest amongst us. And that is what we have to understand. Okay, many of you are already deceived by her and by the climate change agenda, but you are going to see eventually that it is not what it purports itself to be. Now, the Time magazine is saying here that that Miss Mia Mottley is one of the most important persons on the planet in terms of climate change. Okay, so this is what they are suggesting here in the Time magazine. We have many reports here suggesting that Barbados has defied the odds but his greatest test still lies ahead, says Prime Minister Mia Mottley. So we have Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley has delivered a powerful reflection on the country's transformation over the past 8 years, portraying a nation that has emerged from economic crisis and global uncertainty to become one of the Caribbean's most influential voices on the world stage. Addressing the nation, Mottley said, the story of the last 8 years was not simply about government policies, but about the collective resilience of Barbadians who stood together through some of the most challenging periods in the country's modern history. Her remarks came at a time when Barbados is enjoying one of its strongest periods of economic stability in more than a decade. The country's economy has maintained steady growth following its post-pandemic recovery, with GDP expanding by approximately 2.7% in 2025 after growing around 4% in 2024. Barbados' nominal GDP has risen to more than $8 billion US, while GDP per capita has climbed to nearly 29,000 US, making it one of the highest income countries in the Caribbean. But we hear that Barbadians are struggling, right? That's what we're hearing. Now let's listen to Monica. That's Monica. Welcome to the live. You're saying the rich living sweet, but the less can't get no money to spend. We're suffering. Absolutely. Absolutely. But what they're doing, the agenda is to tell us that climate change is the greatest threat on the planet to our existence. By so doing, people are going to be afraid because they're seeing hurricanes, they're seeing earthquakes, they're seeing natural disasters. And yes, these things are happening. But whilst they are actually inspiring us, forcing us to borrow more money, billions of dollars, are these funds going to be directed to the vulnerable, to poor people? And the answer is no. And we have seen what has happened in Haiti, and I'm going to hammer that in your head until you understand. And we see what happened in Jamaica last year with the hurricane, right? Hurricane Melissa, and that people are still unhoused, and all of the billions of dollars that were sent in donations have not reached really the most vulnerable. Houses have not been rebuilt. You know, so that is what we have to understand. This is not what they say the agenda is. Now let's look at some clipping here, some clippings of the video in terms of people looking at Miss Mia Mottley for whom she is, right? So let me share my screen with you and share some clippings here, and you can react, respond to what these people are saying, because we're here to have an intellectual conversation. I know we don't like it, but that is what is this channel is all about. Not the gossips, but the thing on the screen. And we are going to look at, I might have to rewind the video
so
that you can
visionary saving the world. But back home, the island is teetering on the tip of failure. While the speeches continue.
Here, sorry about that. Oh, no, this is what I was trying to show you. I'm not sure why that going off there. Wait a second, people. I think I might have gone off the side of the clipping. Okay, so let me go up. Was not trying to get you, and that was a very good one, and I seem to have, I'll probably pull it up another time. So let me get here and get you on the screen. Okay, so let me turn. Are you seeing it? Okay, you're seeing it. Okay, so let me. It wasn't on the screen, guys. It wasn't on the screen. All right. Sorry about that. Let me see if I can put it on the screen. I think you were hearing it, but you weren't seeing it on the screen. Yeah. So let me see if I can get it up for you. What's going on here? All right. So let me.
Companies which are conscious, but how can an oil company be conscious when they are drilling in the waters? It honestly doesn't make any sense. It's just bizarre, to be totally honest with you guys. I just want to hear everyone's thoughts in the comment section down below. And yeah, I'm still shocked.
I will play it.
Reading all this information about this. Barbados, an island which is located in the Caribbean and is always lecturing the world about becoming more climate resilient, has just discovered that they have around 13 billion barrels of oil and 40 trillion tons of gas sitting in. Start drilling into their waters for the oil and gas, and 19 offshore blocks will be able to do this. The deadline for this is September 2020, early as 2027. But this all depends on negotiations and agreements with these companies. But you know what I find so crazy is Mia Mottley, the Prime Minister of Barbados, has been at the United Nations a lot of the time talking about climate change and going more towards net zero. But she's allowing her government and oil companies to start drilling in their waters. Aren't they thinking about the negative effect this is going to have on the ecosystem? Understand right now across the world energy prices are really high, but Barbados should have done what China did a while ago. China invested a lot into renewably suffering with the war which is currently happening in Iran, because as we should know, this is having an effect.
All right, so we see where they speak from many sides of their mouth, right? That is what we see, that they're speaking from many sides of their mouth. One time they're saying that climate change is a great thing and we need renewable. Behind the scenes, however, they're actually plowing for oil, searching for oil, discovering oil. And we see that it's happening in Jamaica, it's happening in Guyana, right? And it's happening in Barbados. But these are the same people who are telling us that we need to transition from fossil fuels into renewables. But they're going to be using fossil fuels nonetheless, right? Because that is how they make their monies, right? So we see here a clearly, what we call it now, distinctly deceptive agenda, right? Agenda for themselves and one agenda for us. And their agenda for us is to impoverish us, right? Because if we stop using fossil fuels, many people are going to go out of business. Okay, so don't think that this renewable is achievable for most people. It will not be achievable for most people, for the large majority of the human population, right? Good evening, Maria. And we hear that no, you weren't hearing. And then we have Trevor saying, hey, Andrew, no audio. And if you're playing a video, nothing is showing. All right, let me see if I can play it again. Did you hear it or you didn't hear it? Did you hear it? Did you hear the video? All right, let me play it again. That was weird. Did you hear the video? Let me see if I could put it back on the screen, because that was strange that you didn't hear it. I was hearing it from here. Let me see if I could put it back on the screen. Did you hear the video? Let me ask you if you hear it, because it was loud and clear here from my end. Okay, you heard it. Okay, good. So let us go to another video. I was hearing, I thought you didn't hear that video. Let's go on to another clipping that you need to hear, that I've had here for you to hear. Okay, so I'm going to put this one up on the screen for you. And thanks for those of you who told me that you did not hear it. Now, but this one now, I'm going to put this one up on the screen. Let me stop it here, though. And let's share the screen and get this one up so we can look at what is happening here. Because it's a lot of hypocrisy that we're seeing in Barbados, in the world at large, and we have to call these hypocrisies out, right? Let me see if I can put that there and place it on the screen. And place this on the screen. So let's get this up. And we shall start it. Okay, so why is this loading here?
Flying from summit to summit, lecturing global economies on climate justice in the Bridgetown Initiative. She is praised as a visionary saving the world, but back home, the island is teetering on the tip of failure. While the speeches continue importing 80% of its food, while a historic rise in gang violence shatters the island's safety. Worse still, the country's infrastructure is rotting from within. Residents face chronic water outages from ancient bursting streets. The basic utilities that keep a nation running are collapsing. And the hypocrisy is starkest at sea. While the government preaches environmental salvation, they allow the cruise industry to dump massive volumes of waste. A single ship spews nearly 300,000 gallons of sewage and wastewater daily, often just 3 miles offshore. The Prime Minister may be busy fixing the global financial system, but Barbados itself is breaking down.
Okay, good. All right, so we lots of contradictions. While Barbados is suffering, Ms. Mia Mottley is busily at international conferences trying to coerce people to adhere to the climate agenda. Now, a lot of you sometimes believe when I speak that, oh, he doesn't know what he's saying, but I want to share this article with you. 2 articles rather. I'm going to share the first one from the London School of Economics. You know, somebody yesterday on my video said, oh, what are you talking about? You know, religion is actually petty, right? And this is coming from the London School of Economics. And most people think that the London School of Economics is a secular institution. But let us look at what is coming from the scientists, right? Coming from the scientists at the London School of Economics. I'm going to share this one with you so that you can see what I'm reading. Maybe I should also pull up the font so that you perhaps can be a little bit more conversant with what I am reading. Let me close this thing here, right? And why is religion important when talking about climate change? And this was actually written on Tuesday, 27th of January, 2026, this year, right? And this is coming from not a church, but coming from the London School of Economics. Religion might not be the first thing that comes to mind when having climate change conversations, but work by Hanane Benadi and Christian Null shows it is critical to many people's lived experience of the crisis. When 21 people, mostly children, were killed by a flash flood near the Dead Sea in Jordan in 2018, shockwaves went through the country. The disastrous consequences of climate change had become all too real for the people of Jordan. The impact of climate change on people's lives is something researcher Dr. Hanane Benadi from the Religion and Global Society Unit at the London School of Economics cares about frequently in her field work in the Middle East, where she was recently involved in a project exploring climate change and interfaith relations. After speaking to people on the ground in Egypt and Jordan, Dr. Benadi discovered a disjuncture between the language used by the global north about climate crisis and the conversations emerging in the Middle East around people's lived experience of the issue. People in the West are developing the narrative around climate change, and the rest of the world is left out. But hear what the article continues to say. Climate narratives must be global while language matters in the Middle East. People in the West are developing the narrative around climate change and how we think about it and respond to it. And the rest of the world is left out, she says. They're expected to be receivers of that knowledge rather than producers of it. We have to bring these people who are at the forefront of the problem into the conversation. So they're trying now to merge the climate agenda with faith, with religion, right? And why they have to do it? Because we're often hearing the narrative coming from the West, but oftentimes the global South is not speaking about it. Part of involving people in the conversation is framing it in a way that it is relatable and which connects with their experiences and understandings of climate and weather. When you only talk about climate change in scientific and technical terms, people don't see how that's connected with them. They don't see themselves as the addresses of that narrative. Instead, they feel it's something the government must deal with, says Dr. Benadi. She describes how terms like carbon footprint are completely inaccessible to the average person in places like Egypt and Jordan, and can to many people in places like the UK too. Listen to what she says. The majority of people have never been on a plane. They don't eat meat every day. They don't own cars. So terms like carbon footprint are meaningless. But when you start talking about changes in the weather and the heat waves and flooding and rain, it becomes a concern to them. They can identify with what's happening. One of the prime ways people make sense of the weather is through religion, continues Dr. Benadi. For example, in Christianity and Islam, rain is very much connected to faith because it's seen as either a blessing or a curse from God. Okay, so they're suggesting here that in order for them to convince the world of climate change, they will have to merge politics, science with religion. If you went through COVID-19, many atheists during COVID-19 suggested that they think that that was more of a scientific, it was more than scientific, it was a religion. COVID-19 and the policies around them was evil, as we know. They were evil, right? And many, including people who are atheists who don't believe in religion, said that this was more than a scientific agenda. It was a religious agenda. Now, with 75% of the world's population identify as religious or professing to belong to a faith, how religion impacts people's understandings of climate change is certainly not something which should be overlooked. All right, this is what she's saying. Now, talk about that. We're going to look at another article coming from The Conversation, and that came up with the same sort of conclusion. We're going to come back to that, and let's go to Conversation. This is an article from The Conversation, and let me get this here. Because we are seeing, I'm opening up the agenda to you for you to understand that what you're hearing on the media is often not what they are really about, that there are underlying things that you have to look at. So The Conversation is here opening why religion is fundamental to addressing climate change. This is not coming from me, ladies and gentlemen. This is coming from secular newspapers and secular universities. For you to understand that your prime ministers and presidents have also a religious agenda merged with science, technology, and also economics and whatever you think, the state really signifies, right? There is no time for imagination, religious or otherwise. We need to act now, an irritated scientist told me during a workshop on work on climate change and religion in 2024. Contrary to the tone of his comment, this scientist was not dismissing religion as being marginal to tackling climate change, but his underlying assumption rang clear. Religion, while undoubtedly a necessary part of the solution, is only useful if it works alongside rational science. Okay? So to convince the world, they will have to merge what? Religion, just like they did in COVID-19 during the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2022 and 2023, I spent 4 months conducting field work in Egypt, living and interacting with Muslim and Christian communities in Cairo and Alexandria. As a salient reminder of the ongoing climate crisis, my research took place over the summer when temperatures reached more than 45 degrees Celsius. These heat waves were a part of everyday discussions, but I didn't hear only scientific jargon used to refer to these phenomena. Often religion was the language. Often religion was the language used to make sense of the heat. Okay? As an Anglican priest in Alexandria told me, members of his congregation understood these heat waves as manifestations of climate change, but at the same time asked him, what is God is trying to tell us? What is God trying to tell us? Is this a sign of his anger? What should we do? In other words, while scientific knowledge was used to explain the extreme heat, religion gave it meaning. Right? So they are not going to be able to capture us with only the science behind climate change. They are going to use what? Faith behind it. Behind COVID also, there was religion. And that is why many people, they were telling you, if you don't take the vaccines, you are going to cause what? People to die. Right? They were appealing to your moral conscience and that you are literally going to kill your grandmother for not having taken the vaccines. Okay? So during the pandemic, that was also about climate change, because while we were in lockdown, they were saying, wow, the climate is at rest because we weren't working. Okay? So they're telling us right now, they're literally telling us, and many people are unaware, that this is both a religious, scientific, political agenda. We must understand that all dictators, whether it's Trujillo in Santo Domingo or whether it is Hitler in Germany, they all used religion to back, and Trump is doing the same thing in America right now to back whatever, evil agenda, the first agenda that they had. Now, Trevor is saying, yes, we heard it. The comment was from before. I got you. Now, let's go to Thazi. We're listening to some of your comments. Yes, playing the video seemed to affect the bandwidth. Yes, thank you so much. And then we have here, Thazi. No, it was sticking on my end. I'm sorry. Did you hear it? Did you hear the video? Did you see it? Okay, I'm seeing and hearing you loud and clear. Thank you so much for telling me that. Yes, but I think that climate change talk is too. Yes, and we have that Macabus, maybe he'll show the one with Boy again, but he was basically saying Mottley is a climate change champion, but is also pushing to drill oil. Yeah, that was what the person was saying in the video, right? That whilst she was actually a champion for climate change, behind the scenes, she's also using the oil company. And she was saying that she wants to use the ones who are more reformed, the ones who will understand that they need to respect the climate and the environment, and which oil organization is going to respect the climate. They're not going to respect the climate. Right? So that is wishful thinking, delusional thinking by Miss Mia Mottley. Now we have here somebody saying, what is it with playing AI narrated opinion? Your content should be maturing intellectually, not progressing to the that level. What's up? Let me say something to you. What is AI? The fact of the matter is that we can learn a lot of things from AI too, can't we? And lots of things that it says in terms of the fact that Miss Mia Mottley is actually pushing for oil. I read it in the newspaper. So this is not AI information. It's information that is accessible to individuals if you want to read Fred Harris. So you've got to read. And that is true that Miss Mia Mottley is in Barbados and she's actually trying to drill for oil, just like Guyana, just like Jamaica. And we see what they're doing, right? We see Trump also in Iran. And what are they doing? They're looking for oil, right? And these oligarchs are telling us that we have to respect the climate. We must respect the environment. At the same time, they're doing things that are actually doing what? Destroying the environment. So that's what we're saying here, not that we are trying, because a lot of the intellectual stuff out there too are garbage, okay? And that's why people are deceived. Stephen Knight says, the using religion as an excuse to brainwash you with this nonsense. This is a man manipulating the climate. The earth goes through cycles. Yeah, but what happened is that, Stephen Knight, they want to convince the entire world that the climate agenda is necessary, right? Now, they can't do it just using science. That's what they're telling us. Because if they use it just using science, people are not going to be convinced. They're not going to understand science. They won't understand about the net whatever, and the carbon dioxide having to go to net zero. That's what they're using, the terminology that they're using, net zero. But they will understand, as the articles are saying, about God's judgment. That they'll understand. In the same way we understood during the pandemic when they talk about death. That if you don't take the vaccines, your grandmother, you're going to kill your grandmother. So they were using that sort of religious overtone to tell you that you've got to do it. At the same time, you couldn't go to church, right? But you have to do what they tell you to do. So these are the contradictions that we're looking at. We're saying that, I'm not saying they should use religion. I'm telling you that this is an agenda so that they can be able to convince the entire world. Remember now that this is a global agenda. Science alone cannot be used to convince the world, all right? When Hitler was in Germany, he did not only use the fact that, Germany needed to change and they need to accept fascism. He used religion, suggesting that, some groups were scientifically and religiously, they were superior, right? And that is what they're using now in the climate, because as they're saying, 75% of the world or more are religious, and they will have to co-opt them. They have to convince the entire world that they need to sign on to the climate change agenda. If not, the people won't accept it, right? And they want to enlist everybody on this agenda. And that is why they will have to use a false religious underpinning to convince people to do that. Now, climate change is just another money grab the oligarchs want us to pay their mistakes. Yes, it's both money, but it's also control, right? It's a one world religion. The climate change is also a religion. That's what I'm saying. If you go and read the Laudato Si by Pope Francis, Laudato Si, I want everybody to go online and read that. Do you know that the climate agenda is coming from that? Right? The Laudato Si. Go and read that encyclical by Pope Francis. And I think he wrote that encyclical in 2015, right? And they are following that agenda word for word. Okay? So it is not just a scientific or political agenda. I did show to you also that the world cannot be united politically. It will never. Right? The world cannot be united scientifically. It will never. The world cannot be united economically. It will never. They always use false religion to say that this is how we are going to be united. So the climate change agenda looks scientific now, but it is morphing, and they're telling us, even in their mainstream papers and mainstream universities, that the climate change agenda has to use religion if it is going to co-opt, if it's going to enlist the entire world. And this is where we have to look out for that agenda. Not that we should or it should be, but that is the reality. Now, Trevor is saying Christian nationalism tied to Republicans and Trump, it's an attempt to remove or repackage the Bible yet again, politically, case in point, King Charles and his multi-religious beliefs, aka paganism. Very good. Now, one of the things we have to learn is the whole matter of what they call the Hegelian dialectic, right? the Hegelian dialectic, which suggests that both sides are religious, you know. So the Republicans they practice what we call the traditional religion of climate change, or their lack of understanding of climate change. So they play that game. And then you have the left now, they have the secular religion, which is what is known as the climate scientific agenda. So you won't hear the Democrats talk about God in climate change, right? However, the agenda that they're foisting onto us is going to be a religious one, where they're saying that this is what the science says and you have to follow it, right? When they're telling you that you have to take a vaccine or medicine, that is not science, and you can't debate it. We weren't able to debate it whether or not to take it or not. That had nothing to do with science. That was a religion, and it was a false religion, and both Democrats and the Republicans did it. And that's what I'm saying. The agenda is the same, approach is different, the rhetoric is different, but the agenda, the ultimate agenda is the same, and it was to take the vaccines, right? And that is what we have to watch all the time. Yes, greetings, Pedro Jamat. And I was saying Laudato Si is what you need to watch, to read by Pope Francis, and that contains the entire agenda for climate change. And they're following it word for word. Just read Trump's also his Project 2025, and you will see that the climate change agenda too, but it's in more a religious frame. It's framed from a religious sort of perspective. Trevor says the biblical end times spoke about judgment, right? But the fact of the matter is that they're using judgment to suit their agenda, not to suit the Bible's agenda, you know, but to suit their agenda, right? And we are told also in the Bible, as you talk about biblical times, that the final days miracles will be performed. So they're going to perform miracles before us. AI is something that we have to watch out for now. Things are happening that your human eyes are not going to be accustomed to, and that is what they're going to tell you. That look at what man can do now. They can cause hurricanes, right? They can create earthquakes. All of these things they can do. And when they do these things, then they can also now come up with the solutions of how are we going to deal with these hurricanes? How are we going to deal with these earthquakes? And that is what they are going to do. And then you can't say, no, there's no climate change, because you're having more earthquakes, you're having more hurricanes, you're having more frequent natural disasters, and they're growing in intensity. So the conversation now is very important for us to understand that a false religious agenda surrounds the climate change agenda. Okay, and that is why you see them pushing it, and the majority of people are deceived, just like you saw in the pandemic. Right, the Paris Agreement, and the Laudato Si is different. That was from the encyclical of the Pope. Now, Trevor is saying, and if you look at the judgment spoken about, it's not hard to tie climate change to a divine, correct, cause for the easily fooled fanatics. Even though it is inevitable, politicians can play the good guy as usual. Right, because the majority of people are going to believe when they see natural disasters as judgment from God, right? So they're not seeing it that sometimes some of them are man-made. Do you see the deception there? That some of these natural disasters are going to be man-made and are man-made natural disasters. In fact, they say it. Many of the climate change scientists say a lot of what is happening now with the natural disasters are actually man-made. But when people are dislocated and they don't have any houses and everything is gone, they're going to say, who do we look to? You're not going to look to science. And people, let me just say something to you. When people lose everything that they've ever worked for, and many of us have not yet, it has never happened to us yet. Okay? Many of us on this platform right now, I'm talking to you. But when these things happen, and some of the dangers that lurk around you, do you think science will be able to answer your questions? Who are you going to turn to? Right? Who do you think you're going to turn to? And that is what many people need to ask themselves. Okay, so we have climate change is a cult. It is a cult. It is a cult. And that is why they're going around the world and they're pushing the agenda. Yes, because it is, in fact, a cult. It is a religious cult. And that is why they're telling us, in order for the entire world to accept it, they will have to clothe it with a religious garb so that people can say, oh, you know what happened? Yes, because we're afraid of the judgment of God. Because what is happening in our world today is sometimes unthinkable. When you look at the intensity of these climate, catastrophes, right? From the earthquake that happened in Venezuela to what happened in Haiti some years ago, right? We're seeing these things constantly. In fact, every day we're getting up to hearing that there's another earthquake. It might not be powerful, but we're having 4 points, whatever, 5 points, right? And they're becoming more frequently now. All right. So, and they're going to tell us, how are you going to justify to them that the climate change is not real when these things are happening every day and people are constantly being dislocated? Right. And we can't prove that some of the climate disasters are man-made. We can't prove that. We know that there are, technologies that can create these natural disasters, but we won't be able to prove them. Just like we could not prove that the COVID vaccine was, well, now we can prove it was not 100% effective. Okay? So we have to look at these things. Make sure you're liking the live and you're sharing, please, so that we can have more people joining in our very intellectually charged discussion. Trevor saying, throughout COVID, Mottley was seen with a copy of the book from Pope Francis. Thank you for telling us that. All right? Because they're literally following the Laudato Si. And I want all of you to go and read that document. Very important. In fact, all the encyclicals coming from the Vatican you should read. But this one, Laudato Si, lays out in a clear and precise way the agenda for climate change. And it is not what you think. The science is being used to deceive you. And you think it is a scientific agenda alone. All right? But if you look at the scientists too, the real scientists are saying that this climate change agenda is a hoax. Many scientists don't agree with it. Many scientists say that they are not allowed to give their perspective, their contrarian views. And the same thing happened during COVID. That scientists who do not believe in that, whatever, in the medicine, they weren't allowed to speak. They were actually suppressed. And the same thing is going to happen for the climate change. And it's going to take on that sort of, this is what we say, you've got to follow it. There ought not to be any sort of disagreement. And that is religious in nature. What we went through during COVID was a religion. And people have not yet woken up to that. Okay? You had no way, it was a blind religion, I must say. Blind religion. And many people they fell for that religion because they won't think for themselves. Then we have here, who's the Bible? The King James, Now, we are not here now to talk about who is what and what religion is right. We're not saying that. What we're here to expose, just like we have science, right? You have different types of scientific whatever, okay? It means, therefore, where science have different theories, we're not here to say which one is the best one and which one is correct. What we're here saying that the climate agenda has religious underpinnings. The climate agenda has religious underpinnings. I haven't said it, they've said it. I've read it to you, all right? So you need to go and read it for yourselves, okay? And some people are saying the London School of Economics is AI. I don't know. Now, AI will be used and your eyes will deceive you. Project Blue Beam is upon us and they can recreate a 9/11 if they wanted with aliens, and all they have to do is kill a few people and the world will follow. And one of the things, I'm happy you said that, the AI, when you look at, and I'm happy somebody brought it up too, when you look at the videos online, even on YouTube as well as TikTok, you really wonder what your eyes see. Because a lot of times it's not real. We're living a time now where it takes a lot of intuition and discernment to know what your eyes are seeing. what you are hearing. Now, we're not suggesting that some of AI might not be true in terms of what they're saying. Some of what they're saying are true, and we ought not to just throw out AI as that, because it has its role, right? However, we can't believe everything that we see. As this gentleman was coming to tell me that, oh, why don't you look at other things in the mainstream? The mainstream, a lot of what in the mainstream, also what we consider to be intellectual, are rubbish, right? And they're deceptive. So we must hang on to that which is true. Yeah, the religious aspect is for those Bible believers. No, it's not just for the Bible believers, it's for the entire world. Remember now that COVID was not only for the scientifically minded. COVID-19, the pandemic, was for the entire world. The entire world had to be locked down. The entire world, whether you liked it or not. The entire people who went to church or wherever they went to were not able to go to church. Yet what you call it now, the gambling houses, they were open. The casinos were opened, right? While people could not go to church. So that it was a religion, but it was a false religion. That's what I'm telling you. It's not for Bible believers. It's going to be for the entire world. And that is why they're telling us to believe it. They're not giving us any chance of, reading the information and saying whether or not we agree or we don't agree. They're telling us that this is a climate agenda. We must borrow all of this money, right? Which is going to impoverish us, because all this money that we're borrowing from the IMF and the World Bank for climate resiliency, right, is not going to help the vulnerable amongst us. It is a false agenda. Right? It is a false agenda, which is a sort of religious. If you look at the Roman Catholic Church pretends as if it is the most philanthropic organization in the world. But if you understand the amount of money and wealth in the Vatican, and the fact that most of these Catholic countries are the poorest countries in the hemisphere in the world, you'll understand that it is not. But it has to give you the air that it is this sort of philanthropic entity. The government is doing the same thing. They're telling you that we have to mitigate climate change and its effect. And for us to mitigate it, we have to borrow billions of dollars so we can build resilient homes, we can build the infrastructure, we can put in surveillance equipment, and that is what is going to save you from the catastrophe of climate change. Now, let me ask you a question. Can science predict the future? Can science predict the future? No, right? So what are they going to use to predict the future so that you can believe it? Religion, all right? Where are we coming from? Can science tell us? No. Where are we going? These are not the questions that science answers. They can try, but they don't give us any specifics, right? Correct. Just like COVID lockdowns, they said millions are dying, but the streets were clean and the birds were chirping. Only persons sick were ones who went for testing. One big psyop. Yeah, and that's what we have to understand. It still amazes me that we're still not, learning from what happened during COVID. 97% of scientists agree. No, they don't agree on the climate change. Not 97%. That's what they tell us, but they don't agree on the climate change. You'll be surprised. A lot of scientists do not agree with the climate disaster. Just like COVID, the majority of scientists did not agree. It was a select minority of scientists that agreed with the COVID, policies, the lockdowns, the vaccines. Just a small minority. But because they made them so visible and they were on all major mainstream platforms, it looked like the majority, but it's not the majority. Okay, so the majority of the scientists do not agree with climate change agenda at all. Okay, all right, so we have here that this week, the US got official permission to use direct energy weapons. They have been using it for years, and they carried out some testing on Cubans, but people denied it as always, and now here we are. Absolutely. Very good point you're raising here, Trevor. Now, they must agree for grant funding, Right. Now, who gives the grant? Who gives the funding, Pedro? And that is why you are not going to be able to get the money for your research. If you are not agreeing with the agenda, you cannot get money for the research, right? You must. During COVID, many scientists came out and they told us that when they're doing their research as scientists, even if they have, unpacked what is truth and they're presenting truthful scientific information, if they present it and the powers that be, that information does not cohere with the agenda, then they will deny them funding. They will deny them further research funding. So don't be fooled by grant funding, because grant funding is also political. And that is why the science during COVID was highly political and was not scientific in any way. Science means that we can agree, right? And there are many, everything is debatable. That is what science is all about. The climate change agenda is not debatable. COVID-19 pandemic was not debatable. Can we understand that? The climate agenda, just like COVID, was not or are not debatable according to the powers that be, not according to me. I would like to see debates. I don't want religion to be informing science. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, however, that it is informing it, that religion is informing the whole matter of the climate agenda, because that is the only way in which they can unite the entire world. May I just also pause here to just say to you that the Western world, in terms of what we call the Protestant world, right here in the West, we are the only ones that talk about the separation of church and state and secular society and religious society. All the other world, whether it's Africa or the Middle East or it's Asia, right? Many of them combine their religion with politics, with science, with economics. We are the only ones in the West who talked about separating the state from religion. But it seems like we have never been able to do it. And we are going back to the days, just like slavery, when religion informed everything, what the state does. Okay? So we have here Trevor saying Dubai's biggest set of rainfall was last year. And so in the 50 plus years after overseeding their clouds, and it looked like rain unlike anything else. Seismic weaponry is also real. Absolutely. And that is why they are going to use these things to deceive us. And when people are scared, what will they do? They will bow and worship. And that's what they did during COVID. They scared you, right? And then you went to the hospital and you got your jab and you were happy, right? You were happy. But that was not science. That wasn't science. And science was not used to inform the policies. And that is what the real scientists were saying to us, that no science was used to inform what they did during COVID. So if it were not science that informed them, that informed those policies, what did? Religion. Religion. And that is why many people were so upset, because they were saying, why are you forcing me to do something that my conscience tells me not to do? And they said, because you have to do it, because the state says that you have to do it. And these are what we call religious dogmas. Not that I agree with it, but that is the reality. All right. We have Trevor saying the boy who stumbled on the seismic manipulation had his discovery confiscated years ago. Right? So these are the things that we're finding out. And science is going to use a lot of these, as you're saying, Trevor, mysterious ways of, presenting magic and mysteries to people, and people are going to believe, because AI now and technologies are able to do things that you and I would never even have imagined could have ever happened before our eyes, right? Mosques were open though, right? Yes, because guess what? Why did they close the church? Because they understood that real biblical religion means that you should go and you should test all things, prove that which is good, right? That you should test all things and you should hold fast to that which is good. So if you had church and people went to church and they started to talk about their conscience, that was not good, and the church now began to take up for its congregants, then the state would have lost its power. What the state did, including in the US, it wrote to the churches, all of the churches, Baptists, Adventists, all of the Christian denominations, and told them not to give their congregants, not to give their congregation any excuse for religion. So the state in the US and the world dictated what the churches should do during COVID. And that is why some people went and they said, I don't want to be a part of the church anymore. Because the church was on board for the most part with the state. Right? So this is what I'm saying to you, and that is what you have to understand. So religion is much more than you think it is. It's much more potent than you think it is, because it has to do with your conscience. And when people appeal to your conscience, they can force you by fear, through coercion. But you say, well, I have to do it because if I don't do it, then they're going to take away my job, right? And my granny's going to die. And you went and you took it. Because you were not looking at what is shaping the policies. You couldn't see it. You thought it was science, but it was not. It was what we call scientism. Scientism is the religion of science. That was what it was. It was not science. It was not real science. Okay? Just like the climate change, science is not science. It is scientism. It's a religion of science. And I'm saying this to you, and you will remember it. And I can't understand why you can't understand now, because, we went through COVID. We saw what happened, and people are still believing what they're seeing, what they're hearing coming from the media houses. Last year and the year before sparked so much talk about meteorological community, about weather manipulation due to the level of freak patterns and extremes unprecedented. Absolutely. And we're not watching. We're not trying to say what's going on here. COVID should have opened our eyes, but every event happens and we treat them in isolation. We don't try to connect the dots to say that these things are the same thing and they're building. They're building stage by stage, and they're building until they reach a crescendo. And that is complete deception. And that's what they're doing. And very soon you're going to see some strange things happening in the world, in the heavens and the stars, because the technology and the AI is going to do some things that is going to cause you to shake within your boots. And then they're going to say, wow, isn't that climate change? And you say, oh, yeah, because, I'm seeing it. It's happening out there, right? You've got to wake up. Now, it was termed flood the zone to cause hysteria. Absolutely. That's what they do, Pedro DeMarc. That's what they're trying to do, to cause hysteria and panic. When they do that, when people are panicked and, they see hysteria around them, they're going to respond. They're going to submit. That's the human spirit, all right? Fear. Now, Andrew, a lot of people went back to sleep. It's very unfortunate. Yeah, and it's just, it's so sad. It's so sad when we see that the climate change agenda is much bigger than COVID pandemic. What we're about to see for the climate change agenda is like COVID is like a baby. It's like a toddler in comparison to the climate change agenda. Right? And that is why Miss Mia Mottley was very happy. These people were very happy because they realized, and that is why Barbados was one of the most draconic countries to have lived in during the pandemic, because she understood what the real agenda is. And she was trying to condition her people to understand what the future, for you to see what the future entails. And many people have not yet woken up. And they, oh, my prime minister, and don't get me wrong, people, don't get me wrong. I understand what it means to be patriotic. I understand that it's a great sense of pride when you see Miss Mia Mottley on the world stage as a Barbadian, and you see her delivering some of the most, impressionable speeches that could be delivered by a human. And she's a woman, right? That she's the first female prime minister to come out of Barbados. So, and she's Caribbean. So, all of us as Caribbean people, we are proud. People from Jamaica, they love her, right? In Jamaica, they love her. Just anything Miss Mia Mottley says, in Jamaica, they adore whatever comes from her mouth. All right. So I'm not suggesting that we should not be proud as Caribbean citizens that we have one of our own at the highest levels of power or whatever it represents in the world. But what I'm saying to you, we also have to separate what we are seeing from the reality. And that's what this channel is all about. Okay. Hope I could say something that makes you feel good, but right now it's not about feel-goodism. It's about the reality. Now, select minority, money made most agree. Right. Well, guess what? Money, I don't think that though, because many of us were not given money and we became poorer. I think, the people, powers that be, right? The powers that be, President them out, they were the ones who actually made lots of money. We became more impoverished, or businesses were closed down. All of these things happened. I'm telling you, grant funding is what gets consensus. Yes, but they have to agree that the climate change agenda is in fact scientific. If I am getting funding from a grant at the university, and I don't agree with the climate change agenda, the funding will actually be withheld from me. That is what happened during COVID too. Scientists who do not agree with the COVID-19 pandemic policies and narratives, many of them were relieved of their titles, their scientific titles. Doctors, scientists lost their prestigious titles. Okay? And books have been written about it. And we have to begin now to read and to be able to expose ourselves to what is happening and the broader agenda. Trevor is saying funding comes from the same group, all for one narrative, right? The same group. Once money is involved, people will agree on what to see and not see, right? NGO includes religion, schools, etc. Make sure they keep up the illusion. I'm happy you said that, Trevor, because also the algorithm here, why you think you're getting videos and people are running after the same videos? Because the algorithm spits out what it wants you to hear. So the same thing around the pandemic. When they now begin to tighten up, they're going to make all the knowledge and things that we hear and see algorithmic friendly, right? So whatever is not friendly to the algorithm, you will not see it. And many doctors, great doctors who were giving great information, they were taken off YouTube during the pandemic. The algorithm says, hey, we don't want this one here. Okay? And that is what we have to understand. Many of the doctors that we would have learned much from, they had to go on other platforms where they were not exposed as much as they would have been had they been on YouTube. And that is why we see the high levels of illiteracy in the world at this moment. Now, it was science, political science. Correct. But, when I say science, I mean it was not natural science, right? It was not the science as we know it, natural science. It was not. But it was political science. I agree with you. Because, as I told people during the pandemic, the word science means knowledge, right? So, yes, everything is science. You have social sciences, you have political sciences, you have the natural sciences, right? Everything is a science. Even cooking is an art and a science. Do you know that science is also an art? Because when you look at medicine, the science of medicine is that you study the human body and how it functions, the different parts and all of that stuff, right? And you learn all the scientific information as far as the human body is concerned, and medicines and so on. But the art of the practice is what your opinion, having looked at the scientific data, what is the best solution? What is your scientific opinion to improving that person's health, right? And that is what we have to understand. So the Catholic bishop in Barbados told the country to remember they can pray to God from where they are. Says a lot. People will kill you in faith and find salvation in it. That is the ultimate government weapon. Yes, that is it. And that is it. Political science, indeed. It was political science, but people considered it to be science because they saw doctors in their white robes and they were talking. They're doctors from Harvard University, scientists, right? Dr. Fauci, and all these guys with their eloquent, understanding of what they think was science. So people believed it was science, but you and I know it had a political agenda and also a religious undertone. Do you know that Dr. Fauci, by the way, is Jesuit? And Jesuits, if you read who they are, they pretend as if they are secular, but they have a religious purpose and agenda. Very important we understand that. Stephen Knight is saying, you see, a lot of people are waiting for the media to explain this to them. A lot of older people do not listen to alternative media. They think the talk is conspiratorial. Yeah, and I think even younger people are suggesting that everything, this guy came on, are you listening to AI and whatever? Sometimes AI says things that we can listen to, right? And it's information that we can take stock. Not everything AI does or not everything anybody does is believable, right? Including universities. So we have to, study everything and to reflect upon everything and take everything with a grain of salt, with a pinch of salt, because right now we don't know what to believe. When you look at the internet, you don't know what you're looking at really. It's very difficult now to determine what is real from unreal. Yeah, and Steve Knight is saying, yeah, we are going through the Obama effect with Miss Mottley. Yes, okay, and because she's so eloquent, dynamic speaker, and we're giving her props. We're not taking from Miss Mottley what is not hers, and we hope that maybe she is sincere, but we know the agenda is not sincere. Maybe Miss Mia Mottley is sincere, but the people with whom she is working, they're not sincere. The IMF is not sincere. The World Bank is not sincere. They have damaged our countries. And why would we believe them, people, when we see Barbados and the IMF policies in Barbados? Look at what these austerity measures have done to Barbados. That I understand that there are children in Barbados who go to school, according to what Miss Marcia Weeks has said, and other people have said also, who go to school without lunch money, who are hungry in Barbados. And Barbados has never been known for that sort of poverty. Maybe Jamaica, yes, but not Barbados, right? So it shows you that the IMF policies are not working, are not effective, and they're not helping Barbados to expand its economy and for its people to progress and to prosper. It's not. In Jamaica, the same thing. In 2013, Jamaica had to run a primary surplus under IMF of 7.5%. 7.5%. Now, if you're running a primary surplus of 7.5%, you have no money left to do anything. You practically can't do anything. And if you go to Jamaica today, all the roads are filled with potholes, except for the highways that the Chinese built, and people have to pay their tolls. All right. So this is what we're saying. If these people were sincere, do you think that they would have asked Barbados to run a primary surplus of 6% in their first year of the IMF agenda? Or do you think that they would have asked Jamaica to run a primary surplus of 7.5? No, they are not sincere. So why do we, when they say that they're being reformed, when Ms. Mia Mottley said they're being reformed or that they need transformation, we're seeing that they're not being transformed and that they're actually taking money from the poorest of us, giving it to the richest of us, and people are suffering, or infrastructure is collapsing, and everything is just going haywire. Our parliament has a chaplain to bless it. Yes, well, all of them do. And then we have Stephen Yup, and the fake news term repeated by Trump will be fought and led many further into emotional divide from anything the narrative, and follow the educated choice by the professionals. Yes. And, I'm happy that, we're in the minority in terms of our understanding of what is happening. And I'm happy, but never think the majority will ever follow what's going and will be on the right side. The majority are always on the wrong side. For some reason, history tells us that. The majority are always on the wrong side. And the maize to guide, yes, right. The other day, the maize in Jamaica was touched, and somebody was like offended that the maize is something like is some supernatural power, which I find ridiculous. Predator Mark says, yet people believe the island is sovereign and not them. Correct. Well, neither of us is neither sovereign right now. The island is not sovereign. Neither are we sovereign. We are slaves for the most part. Now, Mia has an army of religious consultants. That's what Trevor is saying. Reminds me of the bad guy in the 80s cartoon with lots of magician henchmen among the guards. Now, that's what they told us in the articles, right? That you have to use religion if you are going to convince people of the climate change. People are not going to understand. Okay, let us be very pragmatic. Do you think the average person understands what net zero is? Do you think the average person understands all of these jargons, these scientific jargons that they're using? Not even some of us who are very educated understand them, right? We don't understand a lot of in fact, a lot of what they say doesn't even make any sense, don't make any sense in the first place. But the fact is, even if it made sense, we don't understand scientific jargons. Right? So the fact of the matter, they will have to use something that appeal to the global populace. And what they're saying, the global population has a faith, has some faith, practice some faith or the some form of faith or the other. 75% of them practice some faith, right? Whether it is they're Muslims or they're Hindus or they're Christians. So they're going to put that climate thing in that sort of lens, through the lens. They're going to filter the climate agenda through that religious sort of lens. And that is what the climate change agenda has to do about. But people don't know and they don't want to understand. They just see Miss Mia Mottley as someone who is, has a great, she's doing a great job. Now, that is true ever since she has got in office. Right? And who would have thought Miss Mia Mottley? Miss Mia Mottley does not look in any way religious, right? Does she? No, she looks more secular than anybody can ever imagine, right? But at the end of the day, she has lots of religious consultants. It says a lot. It says a lot about, what this agenda will be able to tolerate in order to implement its nefarious agenda. So we have Pedro saying, yes, and the maize, what an interesting symbol to be using. Right, I don't know if you heard this the other day, there was this person who touched the maize in Parliament in Jamaica, and that person was, disciplined for doing that. I'm like, what is the maize? Why is it so, like it was sacrilegious for her to, or for him to have touched it? Now, Mia's favorite show was Bewitched. She wiggles her nose and gets things done. Yeah, she's effective. Right? She's effective. She is effective. And that is what it happens, that she's effective. There's nothing religious about her, hell no, or the people around her. Yeah, right. There's nothing religious. She's not a religious person in the traditional sense of the word. But, what she's doing has religious underpinnings. Right? Because if you're going to force people, if you're deceiving them, if you're not allowing them to think for themselves, then that is religion. That's a blind religion, right? Any real religion, any true religion, or any true knowledge should present ideas to you and allow you to determine whether or not you want to agree yes or no. And that's what we have here on this platform. We don't all agree with each other, do we? No, we don't all agree on every point, but we highlight them, we present them, we debate them, and yeah, that's what it's about. So I disagree with you or you with me, and that's okay, because we are individuals and we have different thinking and we are from different backgrounds, from different cultures. Nothing is wrong with that. But what they're doing, they're pushing these agendas on us, and they're telling us that we have to accept them because that is the science, this is the that, and then we're saying, no, we don't believe that. But they're saying, yes, that is the science. And if you don't accept the science, then we will have to discipline you, right? And they did discipline us during the pandemic. Do we remember that? They disciplined us during the pandemic, and they let us know that they are the ones who were actually in charge. Okay? So this is where we are with Miss Mia Mottley. She is a very iconic person, great person in terms of her, notoriety. But in terms of helping Barbados. And let me ask you that question now. Barbadians in the chat, because I'm talking too much. Barbadians now in the chat. Do you think, because I don't live in Barbados, do you think Miss Mia Mottley, as she is now, and be objective, I'm not saying you must agree with me or disagree, do tell me what is on your mind. Do you think that Miss Mia Mottley is pushing Barbados forward and she's using her global status, her global what image to change the life and the landscape of Barbados? What do you think? I want to know. Did you hear the Carrollton press conference regarding the murder of fishermen? Listen to her excuse. No, I didn't hear that one. But let me hear from the Barbadians in terms of, let me have that question. I want you to respond. And if you want to have a chat, I could send you the link, a guest link, if you want to come and chat. Let me share you don't want to come and chat. I thought some of you said you wanted to chat. You can come and you can talk. You don't have to show your faces. You can turn off your video. Let me send you the link to the studios. And if you want to come in and chat, you can come in and chat, audio or visual or video. She's pushing. She's pushing Barbados forward, but is not pushing to benefit us. Very good. I like that. So yeah, so you can see infrastructure perhaps going up, right? And Barbados looking as it's moving to the next level, becoming a developed country. Yes, but as you're saying here, Stephen Knight, she's not pushing it to the development of everybody. Not everybody. The development is not inclusive. That's the word I should. The development is not inclusive, it's exclusive. And that is what many people are complaining about. Trevor saying, I think she's just an atheist. She tries to be a chameleon, but people still see her mass. I think people say that atheism, people who are atheistic, it's a form of religion too, because you believe in something, whether you worship your money, you worship your the science, or you worship your house or your cow, whatever you put, you think is the most important thing in your life, that is going to be your deity, as it were. So we'll be surprised that people who say that they're atheist, they have things that they believe in. And yeah, because, everybody, all of us want to make a point. All of us need to know where we're coming from. We need to have something that is bigger than us. And that is why a lot of times our prime ministers, they go to other men. Do you know that? A lot of our prime ministers, they go to other men and other women, and and all these people, because they go there to get their blessings from them. All right. So people are religious, and even when they appear not to be, don't follow them. Right. And people have suggested, many pastors have said, they've gone on to the sickbed of many atheists and how they cry out to God, at the last minute when they're, dying. So the fact is, do not follow people, guys. We have to follow our own conscience. If you don't want to be religious, don't be, because that is your conscience. You have the right not to be, right? But for those of us who are religious, we should also respect those too who might not share the same belief system. Pedro is saying she's doing a great job for the UN agenda for one global governance. I like that. That we know she's doing, though, Pedro. I was asking what is she doing for Barbados, but maybe yes, Barbados is a part of the UN agenda. So from that perspective, Pedro is saying that she's still a Buddhist. Okay, right, she's still a Buddhist. Okay, so she's religious from that perspective. Thousand saying Barbados is degrading and there is no future for the youth. Crime is increasing exponentially, and Miss Mottley hardly mentions anything about it. And that's a sad thing, because they say now, Thazi, that the climate change agenda, the climate change is the most existential threat to humanity. So that is her number one priority, climate change, not the economy, not crime, not education, not healthcare, not the whole matter of Barbados youths, right? Her major, and not only her, let's be clear now, not only Miss Mia Mottley's agenda, her primary agenda is climate change, right? That is her number one priority. So that's why she's not mentioning, youth, whatever, their lack of hope and stuff like that. Obeah been making a big uptick in Jamaica. Yes, it is. And around the world too, among the people and school children recently. Absolutely, it is. And people are now trying to justify why it should, because we're using, again, the African, that we're all Africans, and these things were practiced in Africa, voodoo and all of these things. So we should go back to those days of practicing and talking to our ancestors and stuff like that. So to some extent, all of us, most of us in the Caribbean are religious. It's just that we might not be biblical Christians anymore, right? But the fact is that we practice our Obeah and our voodoo and all of that stuff, right? Dolores, welcome to the platform, to the live this afternoon. She's only for the rich and is trying to push the Bajan out of our land. And that is a story for all countries in the United States and, Jamaica and everyone. They're selling out all of our lands, right? They're selling out the major assets, selling out our people, and people are saying, what are we there for? We're voting our politicians and they're not helping us to prosper. And the rich is getting richer while the poor is getting poorer. Steve Knight is saying, how are we benefiting by giving free land to so-called African Bank? And that is something very interesting, because how are we to understand, ladies and gentlemen, I want us to be now very clear and fair, honest. There is a resurgence of this Africa, and we need to reconnect with Africa. Do you think, yes, and I think we do need to reconnect with Africa, because that is, most of us came from that motherland. That is our motherland, right? So we are not here to denigrate Africa and whatever, right? We are here to just reason. Do you think that our governments are talking much about Africa? The same thing is happening in Jamaica, by the way, because they have an agenda. Do you think they just want us to say yes? Because when we hear Africa, people are going to say, wow, yes, why not? Because we're Africans and we want to reunite with the motherland. So do you think that they're just using Africa as a scapegoat to, just like climate change, to force us to adopt and to accept any of their agendas? And I want you to answer that question, because maybe I shouldn't. Got you. Then we have here, don't forget, we are under IMF authority. The same thing with Jamaica. We are under, all of us, most of us are under the IMF authority. And I'm sure that Venezuela and all these countries, including probably Guyana, once you begin to deal with them, you have to take out IMF and World Bank loans. Barbados is showered with showers of hope conversations, and they give you a drop of water when you are within an inch of death each time, hugs and smiles, and then they disappear and hurt you. That's so sad. That is so sad. And that is what we are seeing in the world by large. Why do you think the Ghanaians rather, and Nigerians were invited in to teach Juju? Right. Very good point here. Did you hear what he's saying? Do you see what he's saying here? Yes. And by the way, we are seeing suddenly, Pedro, we're seeing also in Jamaica where they're inviting lots of Nigerians and people from Ghana also for nurses to become nurses. According to the Jamaican government, they want to have a multicultural healthcare industry. And nothing is wrong with that. Don't get me wrong. I don't see anything wrong in, inviting Africans to the Caribbean to work and to, mix and mingle. But we see something strange is happening, because here you have lots of nurses graduating from Jamaican schools and they can't get a job. And you are going to, import lots of nurses coming from Africa to fill those places. I mean, I don't understand what the hell our governments are doing in the Caribbean. Barbados is the tip of the spear in the global agenda, thanks to Mia Mottley. Yes. And I think that Barbados is much more well known now because of her advocacy. Of course, Rihanna is that too. She's a global icon. Trevor, they are pushing Obeah and voodoo as the next step of reconnecting with Africa. That is what I think they're doing. Black magic is good, similar to the cultural change they did with festivals and debauchery. And all of these magic will be able to be plowed into science also, because they will do things that make your eyes tremble and say, what on God's earth is happening? What are you even seeing? Do you know that some of these people can walk through walls? Right? Because they're into the spirit world and they walk through the wall, and you're wondering how they even get through the wall, and they're human beings because they're living in the spiritual realm. And they do things that are not natural to human beings, right? And that is why our politicians are using these things to fool us, including the COVID-19 vaccine. I think that that COVID-19 vaccine was mysterious. It was mysterious, right? A mysterious medicine. Now, then we have Pedro saying, nothing ain't wrong, but the Africans don't get a free pass for reparations. They sold the property. Well, I'm not saying now that, let's not get to that the Africans were the ones who did it. We know that, well, I say Africans, I mean the ordinary people. We know that it is the oligarchs there that did it. Yes, she's using Africa as an escape goat. All of them are doing it. All of a sudden, we're hearing this Africa and the Exim Bank, and we need to collaborate with Africa. The same thing is happening in Jamaica too. And I'm not seeing where they are teaching us in schools about the history of Africa. They're not teaching us the schools. They're not teaching us about the history of Africa. The average Bajan is not benefiting. Yes, and that is the thing. The whole thing is about them and their agenda, and we are the ones left behind, right? The agenda is about Miss Mia Mottley, Dr. Irfan Ali, Miss Kamala Persson-Bissessar. It is their agenda. They're working for their, colonial masters, and we are the ones who will have to take matters into our own hands, right? Look at the pandemic. If you were to use what they told you to use, then you would perhaps be injured, wouldn't you? Now, I played on the bed upside down. The bed was in the ceiling. Yeah, well, hope that you are not being tricked also and being mesmerized by some of these juju and voodoo practices, because they're real. By the way, we're not here to laugh about these things, because some of these things are real and they're dangerous. Let me repeat that. These things are not things to be laughed at. They are real and dangerous and can put your life in great harm. So don't just think that this is some Africa juju and voodoo and obia. They are real. I'm not suggesting now that you should be afraid. Just don't walk down the path of these people. Stay away from them, okay? Because it can affect your lives. And there are things that can play out that you will not be able to explain, okay? Very well said. Yeah, so we're looking at Miss Mia Mottley. Has Barbados benefited from Mia Mottley's global leadership? That's what we're looking at, ladies and gentlemen. And I want you to participate in the discussion. Can you point to specific ways Barbados has benefited from the Bridgetown Initiative? We learned about the Bridgetown Initiative. And for those of you who do not know, the Bridgetown Initiative, I did explain that to you in my introductory remarks. Do you know what the Bridgetown Initiative is, and how did it benefit? How did the Bridgetown Initiative benefit Barbados? The Bridgetown Initiative is a proposal launched by Prime Minister Mia Mottley in 2022 to reform the global financial system so that developing countries, especially small island states, can better cope with climate change and other crises. Its main ideas include cheap financing for developing countries, right? More money for climate adaptation, faster disaster financing, and debt reform. Now, did that help Barbados? Let's look at some of the comments to see what you think. Now, let me see here. Trevor is saying, a man malleable in his beliefs will do anything because he will always be justified no matter what. The lodges gave them the foundation, and it's expanding into educating and liberating the masses. Yes, yes, okay. And in fact, some of these crimes that we're hearing about, I would not be surprised if some of them are linked to the whole matter of voodoo and, juju in the Caribbean. We're hearing some horrific sacrifices of children, horrific slaughter of human beings in the Caribbean that we'd never heard of before. And people are just saying it's just organized crime. But sometimes they are linked up with the spiritual realm and they create these things. Some of the sacrifices that you're seeing, yes. Even the King of England, they practice some of these things. So don't play with these things, all right? They are more dangerous and more potent. Many U.S. presidents, as I'm saying, they link up with Haiti when they want to win. And you know what I mean by linking up with Haitian priests, voodoo priests. Now, it was real too, but in mind thoughts, right? So hope it's not real. Stephen is saying, so we can imagine if we started drilling for oil, that money will not benefit the island. No, just like Guyana, I don't think we have to, and I'm saying to Jamaicans too, we can see what is happening in Guyana. Mr. Pereira has told us, the media houses have told us, Guyanese people have told us that the oil wealth there is not benefiting them. And here what I think that Guyana is the fastest growing economy in the entire region. I think that in 2024 they grew by a rate of like 30-something% in terms of growth. But that money leaves the island, the country, does not stay. The wealth does not remain in the country. Just like tourism, it leaves. Right? And remember too that they are not getting the majority of the profits. They get a paltry, it's just a paltry sum that they get from the oil sales, right? So if Barbados and Jamaica find oil, just like Venezuela too, look at Venezuela, they're telling us that the majority of the profits will be sent out to Qatar and other countries where they won't be able to have any form of accountability. So the Venezuelans also will not have access to their oil profits, okay? Now, and that's why they want Maduro out. They wanted him out of the country because they wanted to access the profits so that they can share it amongst themselves. Pedro Jamati is saying, if the sea is rising, the Bridgetown initiative would not have happened. Wow. What do you mean by that? So if the sea is rising, the Bridgetown initiative would not have happened. Well, I guess they're saying that's why it happened, because the sea is rising and they need money to build these solar, whatever, ports or plants or whatever they're going to build. What are these solar plants, by the way? I guess a renewable energy, I would think. What did Barbados, somebody's asking, Trevor is asking, what did Barbados gain? Pain, suffering? Barbados is already done. 5 years' time, they will be extinct, indigenous people. Even Mia says, get on the wagon. If you're not on it, you're left behind. And it's so sad because Barbados was always the country that many other Caribbean citizens from Jamaica and from other Caribbean countries and the world, the respect that they had for, and probably still have, for that small island nation in terms of the order, the education of its people, right? The sophistication, right? People always have good things to say about Barbados. I've never heard, rarely, if any time you've ever heard of any tourists going to Barbados and have anything, negative to say about the island, right? It's an island that has gained the respect of people around the globe, right? And in the Caribbean as well. So it is sad to see that, and I've never seen it. I didn't go there before it's declining. I should have seen it before it started that decline. Pedro Tomato saying, imagine pushing net zero and want to drill oil. No one asks why you change your mind. I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's what they're pushing for. And net zero, what is that? That's what people are asking. What is net zero? The average person, including myself, doesn't understand what net zero stands for, right? I don't know what they mean. Stephen Knight is saying the sea is not rising. That's what it means. Look what happened in Trinidad. The beach rose 20 feet high. So you're saying that it's rising then? You're saying it's not rising, Stephen? Because you see that in Trinidad, the beach rose 20 feet high. So it's rising. Or it's not rising. Am I misunderstanding? Okay, so we have here the Thousand Macabres is saying they play that African card as part of their greater global plans. They do not care about African, and their mindset is more aligned with the global agenda and the European mindset. Yes. There's nothing, because if they cared about African, as Tazi is saying, wouldn't they be having an African, what do you call it now, curriculum in our schools where we can learn a lot about African cultures, right, and their histories, etc., etc., etc. That is how we would be able to, and shouldn't she be defending Africa in terms of, the West and their exploitation of the resources in Africa? But you hardly hear her say that apart from climate change, she doesn't talk about that, rarely in her speeches, right? She only addresses that and she puts it under the umbrella of climate change, right? And gender equality, if you will. You certainly ain't see the design for Bridgetown, Dubai on steroids. They all say that they want to make the Caribbean a second Dubai. And I don't blame them. I blame them because most of our Caribbean citizens, they think that development means that you see some high-rise buildings going up, some skyscrapers. I see the same thing happening in Jamaica. Lots of skyscrapers, and they think that that is development, and they're not looking at the lack of hospitals, the lack of good schools, the lack of good roads, infrastructure, water. Right? Nobody's talking about that, but they are, they're on YouTube and on TikTok. They're all talking about all of these skyscrapers and how many, what do you call it? They have floors they have up into the sky. Now, Trevor is saying even tourists in Barbados are asking what the politicians are doing with the physical landscape and what is happening with so many unemployed people and low opportunities. Wow, I wonder if they asked that in Barbados, what would they say about Jamaica? Well, I guess they've been saying that a long time. That has been happening in Jamaica for a long time. According to Ms. Mia Mottley, though, she's saying that the unemployment rate is standing at 6% in Barbados. Is that true? According to Ms. Mia Mottley, the unemployment rate in Barbados is 6%. In Jamaica, they say it's 3.5%, which I think is a lie. Okay, so we can see the politicians are actually lying all the time, and that they are actually telling us, trying to deceive us, telling us that unemployment is low when it is really high. The problem is, how do they measure unemployment? The land is rising, not the water. I see what you're saying. The land is rising, not the water. And could it be that they're doing something to make the land rise? That's what we need to ask. Are they doing something? And we have to study that too. No, most people don't know what net zero is, right? And I wonder if the politicians even know what it means because we don't know. They're telling about not net zero, net zero. My take about, well, I think what they mean that they want to eradicate totally carbon dioxide. But as we suggested, if they eradicate carbon dioxide, then our plant life is going to die because plant life depend on carbon dioxide to grow. And then they give us oxygen. So not only plant life will die, and when the plant life dies, then we are going to die because we depend on plants to give us rain, relief rainfall, and also oxygen, right? So they need to go back and that's why I'm saying, guys, that the climate change agenda is not rooted in science. It's rooted in voodoo. Okay, let me repeat that. The climate change agenda is rooted in voodoo and juju and all of the things that you call them, right? It's not science, because if it's science, they know that we need carbon dioxide and we need more trees, we need more plants. And if we want more plants, we need more carbon dioxide. Even me, and I'm not scientific by any stretch of the imagination, if I know that, why can't the scientists know that if they're really good scientists? Now, God Unite is saying, Mia is a power-hungry and money-greedy woman. She is a great deceiver. I really wonder why so many people think she is the opposite, that she is this kind woman who represents the Caribbean, Barbados, and the Caribbean and the global South very well. I don't know why they're fooled by her, because there's nothing that she says that really impresses me. Maybe because we understand what the agenda is, right? We understand. Okay, Barbados government is corrupt, right? So the entire world is corrupt, and the governments of the world. Now, with the stroke of the pen, the Caribbean can be the 55th state of the African Union. I think they want us to be a part of the American Union, right? A part of the, what they call it, the American Union. Yes, and according to Trump, we are part of the Americas, and he owns the Americas, so we are part of this great Americas. And not that we're part of the United States, but we're a part of the Grand America. Remember, you had Grand Columbia. We had Grand Columbia, so we have now Grand Americas, the Grand Americas of which the Caribbean Islands are a part. Now, Stephen Knight is saying she is hiring migrant workers, and that is a lie exactly. That's what they're doing all around the world, hiring the migrant laborers. I think day before yesterday, they had protests in Jamaica against the third country nationals, which are who are on their way as we speak. Now, Trevor is saying she also defended Macron and was booed. She was there with Starmer last week or so when he fell too and gave no room to breathe in King Charles' face last week. Well, they all love her because she is convincing the global South. They might not like her personality. They might not like her as an individual, but they like the fact that she has skills that they need, and they're using her, and they will spit her out when they feel that she has accomplished their agenda. All right. But as of now, I think they still like her because she is, world renowned, and the global South is going to fall for the agenda because she is quite respected around the world. Now we have God Unite. All of them people that voted for the BLP need locking up. I'm sure if they had voted for the DLP, it's probably the same thing because they are all the same. Why is she evading the orange man ban? That's a very good question. She is very silent. Mia Mottley is silent. I'm happy you're asking that question because Mia Mottley is silent during the presidency of Donald Trump. She's not saying anything. I think she doesn't want to get into Donald Trump's crosshairs, so she just remains silent. Now, and we're going to die. These people need to take a basic class in science. Yes, but they know the science, Stephen, just like during the pandemic, they knew what they were doing was wrong. They knew, but because it benefited them, because it brought money into their pockets and it gave them more power over us, they did what they did. They knew that we didn't have to have lockdowns. The entire world did not have to be locked down. They knew that the vaccines were not tested well, right? And that they were not healthy. So that is what we need to understand. That is what we need to understand. You said it's Prime Minister is suggesting that. Okay. Not the reports of unemployment are all lies. Yes, most of the jobs given to people in Barbados, even by government, are being contract jobs, which are always in question and unstable, no respect for labor laws. The same thing is happening in Jamaica, the same thing. That's why they're saying, people are there saying, I don't know what you're talking about because the jobs that we have here, we can't survive. Pedro Jamata is saying climate change is depopulation in nice words. It is. And that's why the net zero means depopulation, because it means no carbon dioxide, which means no oxygen, because if there's no carbon dioxide, we won't have oxygen. And then if we don't have oxygen, we are going to die. So Trevor is saying he would expose Barbados on a grand scale and call her for what she is. He doesn't care, as he said before, shithole countries. I don't think he's going to call Barbados that, because his country too has become one of that. What he's saying, look at what is happening in the United States. Look at what is happening there. Chaos. People are killing each other, right? So the United States is not much better than what is happening in the Caribbean countries. Steve Knight is saying she has certain people have in her office. That's why the corrupt title blackmailed, right? Yeah. GJ, sorry. Welcome to the live, sir. All of science is a cult. Well, the science that is coming from the mainstream is a cult, right? I remember when they caught the scientists in Geneva who work on CERN Collider were caught making sacrifices to Sheba, right? And what I want to say to you, not all science is bad, because I find people sometimes saying that because of what has happened, they've given up on science. You can't give up on science, because good science is still necessary and needed. Okay, we only have to understand that we must read for ourselves and see what is good, what is right, what is upstanding. Same thing with religion too. Don't just put religion out of and say, I don't want to be religious. I don't want to. You need to look at what you think is the right one, right? So don't just throw everything. Don't throw the baby out with the bath water. And many of us think that we can survive without religion, without science, without economics, without government, even bad governments. We need governments. We don't need bad governments, but we need governments to be able to have some form of structure. And many people are thinking that we don't need them because, but we don't need anarchy too, right? So we must understand that we need, not because something is bad in this dispensation, should we say that we should throw it out and say we don't want any science at all. We need some science, okay? Steve Knight is saying, like I said before, the Obama effect. She is the Obama effect. She is the epitome of the Obama effect. In fact, when she came on the stage first, when I just learned about her in 2000, because many of us, just like Obama, we never knew about Mia Mottley until maybe 2000, I would say 2018, when she became Prime Minister of Barbados. I've never heard about her before, So, but she has come and she has presented herself as to be one of the most able-bodied politicians in the region. It's her gender that gets the nod. Not only her gender. She's a bright woman, right? She's not a dull woman. She's a brilliant Barbadian woman, right? And she uses her skill, her gift, to deceive, right? So let's not say that she just got the position because she's a woman. She is quite a capable woman, right, in terms of her abilities or skills. She's compliant and leads a bunch of foolish people, not only in Barbados, but the Caribbean as a whole. Yes, she's well respected in Jamaica, and you can't say anything about her. The videos that I've made about her, they curse me out and say that I'm this and I'm that, right? People don't like to hear anybody say anything bad about Miss Mia Mottley in Jamaica. She stopped certain positions, like permanent secretary, from being permanent, and ran by a political board. Wow. Now, Pedro is saying it ain't no better, yet migrants making noise to stay. Wow, that's some serious Stockholm syndrome. Right. Well, what I don't understand, Pedro, and I want people to answer. Do you think the migrants who are coming to these countries, to the Caribbean, do you think that they are going to make more money than we make? That's what we need to know, because why would they be journeying all the way from Ghana to go to Jamaica or to go to Barbados? I don't know. Sort of strange, isn't it? Are they going to make more money? Are they going to be paid in US dollars? Or are they going to be paid in local currency? Well, perhaps the local currency for Barbados is okay, because Barbados currency is not bad. But Jamaican currency? Who will want to work for that? Now, Stephen Knight is saying, this conversation you'll never hear on brass tacks. Right, you're correct. And I tell you, she is a woman. Yeah, she's a woman. Don't get me wrong, she's a woman, but I'm saying that she didn't get her position only on that basis. She is a capable woman and one who has studied, at the highest level. Trevor, you're so right. So, and she's capable. She's highly intelligent. And he's saying that's exactly what I said about Mia. She picks the soft subjects to talk about, the ones with no backlash. Nobody asked her to be our spokesperson. She can choose what she wants to talk about. Right. But, and that is what is happening throughout the world. Our politicians are talking about what they want to talk about, and they're doing things that they want to be done and not the things that we need to be done. So we want jobs, and they're calling in third country nationals to take away our jobs. Whatever their agenda is. The Jamaicans are saying they want a multicultural healthcare industrial sector. We don't mind having, and Trinidad is multicultural in the first place. The Caribbean, for the most part, is multicultural. Why do we need more multicultural whatever? We are already multicultural. From the beginning, the Caribbean has always been multicultural. We have people from all over the world who make up the Caribbean region. So if you want more Syrians, go to Trinidad. If you want more whatever Indians, you go to Guyana and Trinidad. To say she's genius is an overstatement. I don't think she's a genius, but I think she's brilliant. But she's not a genius. I side with people who are greedy, cowards with power or broke cowards, that's about it. She controls everything and can reach you. Big people act like children, scary. Yeah, I don't think she's a genius. I've never seen her as one. I just think that she is gifted in terms of people. Is not very easy to communicate things, even though, and these are complex ideas, and she's selling these to the world, right? I don't agree with what she's selling, by the way. I don't agree with her strategies. I don't agree with her methodologies. I don't agree with her agenda. But I just, give credit where credit is due. And I think that she is gifted, but she's not using her talents and gifts to help Barbadians and to help to reduce inequities around the world, in Barbados and around the world. Steve Knight is saying, no, they're not going to make more money. They're probably going to be on contract. I see what you're saying. So do you think that they'll just have them on temporary contracts and then they send them back home, and then they have other people coming back and forth, and then we are going to be sidetracked? Because what are we going to do? We want contracts too, right? We can't find jobs in the region, or people are unemployed. So why are they going to give them contracts, and then we in the Caribbean need jobs? I don't understand it. Multicultural, or she needs favorable voters. That's a very good point you're making here, Steve Knight. That it could be that they're trying to formulate a voting bloc, right? And maybe they will select, as you're saying, Stephen Knight, they will select these workers, and they have to say, I'm going to vote for Miss Mia Mottley or for whomever, Dr. Irfan Ali of Guyana. Maybe that's what they're doing. That's a very good point you're raising here, that the voting bloc could be something that they're also trying to restructure in the Caribbean. Maybe we are too vociferous in the Caribbean. Maybe we are too, we ask too many questions, Steve Knight is saying, and they have the number to say that Barbadians or Barbarians, or Barbadians, are saying, do not want to work. Barbadians, rather, do not want to work, or we don't have enough skilled workers. That's what they're doing. The narrative is across the region, even in Trinidad. And that's why somebody had to write a letter from the Trinidad Express the other day to say that there are many young people in Trinidad and Tobago who are well-skilled, well-educated, and they can't find a job. And the state is saying that the jobs are there, only that they don't have the skills and the education for them. So who do we believe? That's the question. Who do we believe? That is the question that we need to ask ourselves. So this was a really interesting conversation. Anything that let me see if we could ask a few other questions before we go, so that we can have Trevor saying Jamaicans showed most of the Caribbean how to idolize what is on TV to trade for US culture and make it our own, right? They will connect with those things and brag they're connected to it, good or bad. You're correct. You're correct. While they're not growing, right? They're not growing. Let me ask some other questions before we go. Has Barbados' international reputation grown faster than the standard of living of ordinary people? Do you think, as you go around the world, Barbadians, do you hear more people when you say, where are you from? And you say you're from Barbados. Are they readily, what are they saying when they talk to you about Barbados? And so do you think, let me ask the question again, do you think Barbados' international reputation has grown faster than the standard of living of ordinary Barbadians? Let me go to the chat. So we have here saying, did I miss somebody else? Mia is all about cementing her legacy. She picked climate change because she did not know how Barbados had oil, and now she looks stupid. Can she seriously continue to talk about climate change? Now, Annie, she did not pick climate change. They gave climate change to her. She doesn't control the show, they gave her the show. So they selected her, and they know that she was trained for that. In fact, I think they trained her for that, Annie. And she came on the scene with that agenda. And that is why she's winning successive elections, because they have to keep her until the entire global South is convinced that climate change is a necessary agenda. Guidance, Pedro Jamal. Thank you for joining. Great discussion as usual, great participation. Thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow. And like the Trump administration, there are some people in her cabinet who are not qualified for the job. They have some very interesting background because they have to be loyal, right? They have to be loyal. Right now, our politicians have to be loyal to their leader, because if not, then the leader cannot be in power, right? Because they're going to receive a lot of flack, and people are going to be against them, expose their corruptions, etc., etc., etc. Trevor is saying slave contracts are what are offered in Barbados. So when the report is given for the year or quarter, it is based on the rotation. Yeah, the official report is always flawed according to what they're. And why do you think we can't trust science? Because when you see statistics according to whom? Statistics according to whose interest? That is always what we have to look at. Statistics according to whose interest? Barbados is at the epicenter, Craig, welcome to the live, of the undermining what is left of the Caribbean. Yeah, it is sad because Miss Mia Mottley is talented. And it's sad that our most talented politicians are on board with the global agenda. And they're not about fixing domestic problems that bedevil our countries or island nations, but they're running to be president of United Nations or general secretary of this or that, right? That is what gives them momentum, and not about representing the people that gave them that sort of power and allowed them the privilege of leading us, because we're great people. The Caribbean people are great people. And it's a very sad, day for us, a dark day for us, a dark season, I would say. Not a day, but a season that we're going through. And I'm not sure when this dark season will ever end. Unless we get up, we rise and say no, and we don't want to be deceived by persons like Mia Mottley, who is deceiving us right, left, and center. Stephen Knight is saying, I voted for her and I have the right to criticize her. Yeah, nothing is wrong with that. Nothing is wrong with that. And that's what we have to understand, that we have all rights to support whatever political leaders, because we know what we're voting for. Sometimes it's not everything. A Barbadian years ago in the States, he said something profound years ago, and I kept it with me today. He was a very brilliant man. And he said that sometimes he reads a book, Stephen Knight, and the entire book might not be a book that he agrees with the ideas, but sometimes there is just one paragraph or one sentence that he holds on to, which has changed his life or changed his perspective or helped to change his perspective. So yes, you can vote for Miss Mia Mottley, maybe a policy that you agreed with and you supported. Trevor saying they know her price and her ego is everything. The political juggernaut, what a joke when you know the news media are also cheap whores, and they are, with no real journalism. All of them are given political jobs. Yeah, and they make millions, right, of dollars. The typical, journalists in the United States on these social, the big networks, the CNNs and the Fox, they make millions of dollars, right? Millions. We have Craig is saying, look up for the drowning out of our unique Caribbean heritage with new African migrants. They're coming from, and not only Barbados, Craig, they're going to Jamaica. And I think they're going to go to all parts of the Caribbean region. They're going to all parts of the Caribbean region. And we need to have a live on that. Do you want us to have a live on that? Why so many African migrants are heading to the Caribbean? That would make a good live. I think that we need to find out why. Why are they coming here? Right? What is attracting them here? And I'm not suggesting that, because we have always had Africans here. Every day I look on social media, you see Ghanaians in Trinidad, Nigerians in Trinidad, and and they have children there. So we've always had Africans in the Caribbean. So it's not that we are anti-Africans. We're not. The Caribbean region is not anti-African. What we're saying, what is this political agenda where they are, importing mass African migrants into the Caribbean region? Something here is amiss when the Caribbean region lacks employment, real employment, productive employment. something is wrong. Yes, I think that next week we will look at that because I have some other interesting lives coming. Tomorrow we'll be looking at Trinidad and Tobago and its economy. And the fact that make sure you're liking the live, ladies and gentlemen. Don't come off the live and not. I should be seeing like 30 likes on the thing, right? Or more than 30 likes. Okay, like up the thing so we can boost the algorithm dispensing of the video. But we are migrating to Africa. I think not. We stand right here. Yeah, we're not anti, so we welcome them, and they're always here. In fact, there are many Africans in Jamaica, in other parts of the region. I'm sure in Barbados, in Trinidad. But it's what is happening now that we don't have jobs, and they're telling us that they're importing all these Africans to be nurses and doctors and whatever. Trevor saying, Andrew, every part of Barbados is being run by foreigners now. They are coming in, and Barbadians are taught they know nothing and invaluable unless you are part of the salary class with some cash. Now, that to me is nonsense, because I could understand Jamaica, that Jamaica did not do well as Barbados and Trinidad in terms of educating the masses of its people, right? So they can make that, they can work around fooling Jamaicans that they are not educated and that they're not well skilled and all of that stuff. They're not literate enough and all. But Barbados, has always been illiterate, probably the most literate among the Anglo-speaking Caribbean. Right, that they're telling you guys, they're brainwashing, they are gaslighting Barbadians, letting them know that they are not skilled enough, that they're not educated enough. Wow. So if they're doing that in Barbados, they can get away with that in Jamaica. Because I never knew that Miss Mia Mottley could brainwash and gaslight Barbadians in that way. Right? That is, to me, ridiculous. Now, the Caribbean, Trevor is saying, will become the new Nigeria. I hope you know what that means. I think I know. I think I know. And when that happens, do you think that the United States, I want to know what part the United States has it. I wonder if anybody knows anybody that would like to come, whether Trevor or Stephen or any of you, or if you know a guest that we can invite to talk about that agenda, the Africans and the agenda, I would like to know. I think I would want to have a guest here, that we can ask questions to, and who knows about the real agenda. Steve Knight is saying, now you understand why she made all those trips abroad. She had to get her marching orders, bringing down Barbados' standard of living. And maybe that's what the Africans are called there to do, to bring down the Barbadians' standard of living. Stephen, you're telling us a lot. You're actually using a lot of gems. You're dispensing a lot of gems in this afternoon's program, because perhaps that's the real agenda, to bring down the standard of living of Barbadians. So you have to import all of these Africans into the country, lower the wages, and then say to Barbadians, well, you don't want to do the job, so these Ghanaian, I can't even call it, people from Ghana and Nigerians, they are the ones who will do the job. Now, we have the Trevor saying, yes, every day, and our people are buying into it and cannot even get certain work permits for certain jobs or anything, all gatekeeping. It forces you to leave, give in, or live a hard road in Barbados. You know what they say in Jamaica? And they will say to Barbadians, if you don't like it, leave. Right? So we have 80% yearly 80% of Jamaican graduates, university graduates, leave to other countries. So if you have 80% of Jamaicans who are educated and skilled leaving every year, how is the country going to be built? Right? How is the country going to be built? That's the question we need to ask ourselves. And that is perhaps what is going to happen to Barbados now, that they're going to export labor to other countries. Highly skilled people, highly educated Barbadians will be going to the United States, will be going to Canada, wherever you can find jobs, right? And that is what is going to happen to us, while Barbados is going to be mainly for these foreigners. That's sad. So what happened to the Chinese? The Chinese are coming there to Barbados. You have lots of them there. What Stephen said will make sense, because when more money for UN aid and welfare, which will play into multiple agendas, including the new water shortage one, more problems, more money. Yeah. Have you noticed that they're building, or I'm not sure if it's happening in Barbados, they're building all of these buildings by these, investors. And the water, they're not providing, the amenities. We don't have enough water shortages, all poor roads. The amenities are just lacking. The amenities are lacking, yet they're building all of these buildings. For whom? Right? So what we have, for example, in Kingston, Jamaica, you have a big, what do you call it now, jungle. They're just a jungle. Right? It is sad. It is sad. Let me see if we can ask another question so that we can engage and before we end the live. If the Bridgetown Initiative succeeds globally, which I think it's not going to succeed, what tangible benefits should Barbadians expect to see at home? If the Bridgetown Initiative succeeds globally, what tangible benefits should Barbadians expect to see at home? Remember, you can call into the live too. I sent you my contacts if you want to join the live in terms of talking. Those of you who don't want to write, you can definitely talk. I will put you on the screen and you can express yourselves in 4 to 5 minutes of what you want to say. Anybody would like to go on the screen? Let me just see anybody. Let me just give an experiment because I've never experimented with it. Somebody who can go to the, I gave you my let me give you back the Declassified link. And if you want to join the screen to talk and to share your opinion, let me see you come on the screen and talk, whether by audio or by, let me send the link again. This is the link, all right? You should have it now. Let me get here now to Trevor. Trevor is saying they already had Barbadians complaining about the Canadian labor program a few months ago. They have increased labor transfers, but lowered the wages again with more taxes, so going abroad for cheap. One of the things that is happening is that it's cheap labor, right? So if the Africans come to the Caribbean, we are attracting cheap labor to the Caribbean. If we go to the metropolitan countries like Canada, United States, and Great Britain, among other European states, it's going to be cheap labor, right? So where does it stop? Where does it stop? If you want to join the live, that's the link, all right? So you can join to talk with me. It's not about labor. It's an invasion and colonization masked as labor. Wow. Do you think it's both, Craig? Do you think it's both labor and as well as invasion? Because I think what they're trying to do, Craig, they're trying to cheapen labor, and they're trying to cheapen it globally. So they're moving us from one country to the next. It's almost like slavery, because during slavery, that's what they did. They moved us from one country to the next, right? And that's how they attracted cheap labor. So I want to think that it's an invasion, and the demographic is going to change. The demographics is certainly going to change, but also labor will be cheapened in the sense that they don't have to pay us, what we deserve. Right? So I think that this could be, because remember now that agendas don't have to be one. Sometimes there are multiple agendas within that one agenda. And that's what we have to understand. Sometimes it's not just one thing that they're looking at, several things. Okay, so it could be much more, could be many more agendas in that global, migrant, agenda. Colonization on another level. It is. And we have to go back to read history, because that's what happened during colonization and slavery, that they moved us, along. And notice that if you were in Barbados as a slave and you were too vociferous, they would send you to Jamaica or send you to another island. They're not going to have you there to create any, protests and problem or disrupt what they're doing. So they'll just send you to another country. And that's what I think that the third country nationalism is about. That they're going to, if you are disrupting things in your island, you're complaining, we're having these discussions as we're having now, then they will send us to a third country and say, you are disrupting the program, you are a threat to the nation, right? And they will just pack you up and send you to Africa or send you to Asia or wherever they want to send you to. All right, so this is what we have to watch. This is serious, you know, and that's why we have to reread the history of slavery. We've got to reread the history of slavery, and maybe we need to go back to the Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James, the great Trinidadian writer, and see how the Black Jacobins will help us to see what is happening right now in our societies. Because we're slaves, they're transforming us, and we are getting every day, we are being conditioned to accept our new identity as slaves, right? And people won't even try to understand it. They think that what we're talking about here is some conspiracy theory, that it is not real, and what they're hearing on other programs about, you know, disturbances, what Minister Mia Mottley is doing or she's not doing. But we're talking about her, but we are what? Cementing her in the global agenda, and not just a Barbadian one. And that's the difference with our channel, that we're just not talking about local politics. We're cementing these characters and the policies in the global world in which we live, because we know they're pushing toward this one world order, this one world government, right? And we see it, it's clear. Everything is coming into place, you know? Let's ask one or two more questions, and we can end the live. Now, can you we can't point any specific. Should a prime minister focus first on domestic issues, or can strong international leadership ultimately improve life at home? What do you think should happen? Because people might say that we do need to have, or prime ministers need to have, international global image. But should a prime minister focus first on domestic issues, or can strong international leadership ultimately improve life at home? What would you say? Let us see here in the comment here. We see Stephen is talking. Bridgetown initiatives means we may have to pay to go to the beaches. Right. Or most beaches might be privatized. Well, they're already privatized in Jamaica, so we are already living that reality, right? And there's no going back. I see Jamaicans behaving as if we're going back to having public beaches. We are not going to go back. There's no regression here. It's moving forward. So a lot of what, if people are studying Jamaica before, Jamaica perhaps was the first country in the region where the New World Order, and Haiti all as well, the New World Order agenda was first actually, practiced. I don't know, but I don't see anything good coming out of that program. You're correct. Everything is going to be privatized. Okay? Everything is going to be privatized. That is what it's all about. Yes, clean your house first before worrying about the global community. Another thing, as you said, Stephen Knight, and I want to bring it forward, as you talk about the privatization of our beaches, that is what they're doing to Stephen and the audience here. They are privatizing human labor. They're doing what? They are privatizing human labor. Slavery was that, the privatization of human labor. When they do that now, they can exploit. The government will not protect us, will not shield us. We won't have any rights. A right according to what the corporations give to us, outside of what they give to us. So I'm sure all of these Africans coming into the Caribbean, we need to go and look which organization, which corporate entity is responsible for bringing these Africans to the Caribbean. We need to study that, because this is what it is all about. When you see this happening on a mass scale, you have these private companies who are behind it. Trevor is saying here, prime ministers should focus on home instead of being a grandstanding prostitute. And you're right about that. Whoring out your people for debt. And that's what they're doing. I mean, these are strong words, but it's true. Right? These are some strong and harsh words, and I'm like that too, Trevor. I talk it as it is. Yes, pouring out your people for debt, while your image is being, what is being strengthened around the world. Right? That is what they're doing. They're whoring out our people for debt. And who's going to pay the debt? We are going to pay the debt, and our children, and at a high interest rate. And talk about climate change. Climate change, as we're saying, is a deceptive agenda for us to borrow more money, pay at high interest rates, and give them more of our lands, our assets, our resources, like our beaches, or maybe our homes, maybe possibly our homes that we own, our lands that we own also. We might have to give up because we, in the name of climate change, right? Remember, they're already telling us that we might not be driving cars very soon. To protect the environment, we have to, not drive cars. We have to live in smart cities. So where do you think you're buying land now? Do you think you'll have private properties? Remember now that they're trying to eliminate private properties too. That's the agenda. Okay? That's the agenda for us to live in smart cities, give up our private lands and assets, properties, and just live where government controls us. And government here we call private corporations. Yes. Yeah. That is the agenda. That's the agenda. This conversation was, you turned it up a notch this afternoon. I think that I've never, you've always been deep, but this one is deep with Ms. Mia Mottley. Craig is saying what's happening now is the culmination of something that was initiated as far back as in the 1770s. You're correct. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, Craig. We might have to go back to the study of slavery, the transatlantic slave trade, for us to see what they did, the methodology that they used, and that they're using similar methodologies in terms of, enslaving us, re-enslaving us. And today, while I was preparing for the live, I thought about Barbados. And Barbados stands at the center of the slave trade. Many of the methods that they use, they refined right there in Barbados, that they used in other parts of the Caribbean, and even including the United States. So it's interesting that this Barbados initiative, right, is being used as the climate change agenda's primary, blueprint, and that they'll be using it all across the Caribbean and the world. And that is what makes Miss Mia Mottley very famous, right? The fact that she is being used as the priestess, as it were, of the climate change agenda. Now, Steve Knight is saying, now what happens if we refuse to pay this debt now? We'll be enslaved. For sure. For sure. We will be enslaved. And that's why they are trying to get us into more debt. So we see where the climate change agenda is to increase our debt. And the more debt we have is the more they control our economy, and they control us, and they can sell us, and they can do with us whatsoever they want to do. Now, Steve Knight is saying that is a question that needs to be asked. This new generation coming up, I guarantee you, will have something to say. They're pliable. The new generation that is coming up is not like you and I, Stephen. The new generation that is coming up now, they are just lost. They're lost on their machines. A few of them might be conscious, but the most of them are not conscious because they think that this is where we're going. They're modern, and we were living in, La La Land, in a backward world, a backward society, while they're living in a modern society where they have to listen to the likes of Miss Mia Mottley. And she's all over their social media spaces, and she seems to be well respected, well regarded globally. So they are going to believe her, just like Barack Obama, right? Because she is the face of climate change, whether we like it or not. Miss Mia Mottley is the face of the climate change agenda, okay? Because she can be able to convince the global South, which respects her and regards her highly, from Africa to Asia to Latin America to the Caribbean. People tend to love Miss Mia Mottley and her soaring rhetoric whenever she speaks. So this is a serious agenda. We should have had thousands of people on this live to talk about what is the agenda, what is the real agenda behind the climate change. And where we have identified several. We have identified labor, the labor, migration. We're seeing many Africans coming to the Caribbean. We're talking about loans that we will not be able to pay back, right, at high interest rates. And we might have to pay back for, talk about reparations. I think that the more we are giving, the poor countries are giving and feeding the richer countries, I think that we are the ones who are paying for the reparations, right? They're telling us about reparations. The Caribbean ones we are the ones who will have to pay reparations to these countries, which is sad and it's ironic. Trevor is saying human capital. And most of the new generation topics who will free us and fight back is a joke. They did not know freedom like us and what we lost and will lack conviction and accept their new identity. Yes, well said, Trevor. Craig is saying, read the book, The Races of Men, a fragment by Robert Knox, 1850. Thank you for that book. We need to read that book. And maybe, I know many of you had asked me if we should form a reading club. Maybe it's now we need more than ever to form that, because we need to talk about these matters. The Races of Men is one of those books, and the Black Jacobins by Sarah James, and lots more. And we probably could begin with these books, right? Like The Races of Men, because these things will give us great insight into what the agenda is. People, history is not something that just happened years ago. We are literally living history. Right? So we need to go back to history and see how men were trying to achieve their agenda, how they went about it, because sometimes they never achieved it fully, and their descendants are still working on achieving these goals and these objectives. And that is what we are literally witnessing right now. Yes, could you, if you have a chance, Craig, can you put the quotation in the chat, page 178, if you can put it, and we can read it together. If you have access to it online, do you have an online copy, an online version of that book? And page 178, could you probably put it in the chat? Could you cut and paste? The Races of, or somebody, can you help us with that if you can? And you can look up the book. The name of the book is The Races of Men, a fragment by Robert Knox, was written in 1850. And if you can do that, we can just put it in the chat and read that page 178 to end our chat, to just have something to end the chat with, something of substance. What a beautiful conversation we had today. You know, this was really, when I came first, I felt like I was going to get off and say, okay, these guys are coming. But you actually came and you really engaged. And maybe we need to talk about Miss Mia Mottley more often, because we get more than the average number of viewers when we talk about Miss Mia Mottley on this live. You know, Miss Mia Mottley is indeed a famous person, or notorious, we should say. Yes. Anybody? Can we get? Okay. Yeah. Can we get it on the chat? Can we get the paragraph? Andrew, do you have a WhatsApp? Yes, I have WhatsApp. Let me send. Can you send me a link, Stephen? Can you send me an email? My email address. I can't put my WhatsApp online, so let me send you my email address, and we can talk via that. And if anybody wants to send me an email of what you want to talk about, you can also send it to my email address. Let me see it there. Can you pull it up, Craig? Can you pull up that thing, the link? The policy of this is my email address. For those of you who want my email address, you can this is my email, agtuckerus@gmail.com. If you have questions, if you have suggested recommendations for lives, please let me know. If you want suggested, guest, if you have a suggested guest also for live, please let me know. We'll set it up, and then because this is not a dictatorship, this is, we're democratic here, so you tell me what you want to talk about. Now, so you can send me that information, Stephen. Then we have Craig is saying the policy of European races would be to expel the Negro and transplant the Coolies, the Hindus, Chinese, and other feeble races. Wow. Wow. Which they were trying to do, right? But they never really succeeded fully in doing. They got a lot in Trinidad and Guyana, but they did not accomplish, because I think that Jamaica was really anti these coolies and Chinese people in the earlier part of the history, and many of them left. But many of them settled in Guyana and also in Trinidad. So you are right. And we can see what is happening in Trinidad and the rift between the Indians and the Afro-Trinidadians. Stephen is saying she may be famous, but we are being duped. Right. When I say famous, I mean, she she has given me some momentum in my life. Because normally we have an average of just 20 people on the live, and today we've seen quite a bit of people on Miss Mia Mottley's live. Any other question? Any other question? Comment? It was a very good conversation today. Because we need more lives like this so that we can talk more important matters. I want to read something before we look at, we were looking at the London School of Economics, and it says the link between climate change, religion cannot be ignored. Part of Christians' role involves working with policymakers in the UK and providing them with the tools and appropriate language to speak to communities in their constituencies about climate problems and how they can be addressed. If you look at what levers you have to pull to address climate change, we're talking about land management, buildings, finance. Faith communities have a lot of capital within these sectors that's not often talked about. For example, faith communities own about 10% of the world's total financial investment. So yes, religion and their buildings and what they do have interest in climate change, because they have buildings, they have properties, right? In terms of the Catholic Church, it has banks, the Vatican Bank. So they are interested in climate change, right? And they will be a part of that conversation. Yes, I will hit you up to call, right? And I'll send you my WhatsApp to you via my email. Yes, so you guys have a good night. Thank you so much. And thank you so much as usual, Stephen. Thank you very much for joining the live as usual and your great participation. Learned a lot tonight. Yes, so that's what it's all about. We learn a lot from each other. Tonight was a very good conversation. I learned from you, you learned from me, and that's what it's all about. Thinking, right? Because you will say something I didn't look at, and probably I say something that you never looked at. So we want to thank you. Tomorrow we're going to talk about Trinidad and CARICOM and Mercosur, and is Trinidad really losing its place in terms of its industrial base as a nation state? It's sad where we're moving, but we have to speak the truth. Please come tomorrow. I think I'm going to start the live at 6 o'clock if I recall. Check my notification. Please check the notification, people. Go on my channel and check the notification, because sometimes I do forget when these things, and the algorithm does not necessarily send out the notification to you. Thank you so much for joining. Excellent discussion. Thank you so much, Trevor. As usual, you were excellent in your analysis, and we look forward. Without you, the live is not the same. And I mean it, Trevor. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll see you tomorrow. Have a great night.